Well, you know what they say, Jay. You are what you eat.
Uh-oh.
Hey guys, welcome to another Lords of War Games and Hobbies video. I'm Chris and this is Jay, and we're here to chat about a fun little topic, I think, a little spicy nugget, which is the concept or idea that as Warmachine saw a decline in sales and popularity, you know, there's a corresponding increase and rise in competitive Games Workshop play, organized play more specifically, and leading to almost like a current era where that's more of a mainstream focused item. So we'll talk a little bit about the history of that and why we think that is, and before people start going nuts in the comments about they're upset. Keep in mind, obviously, all our opinions are our own. We just witness this stuff as customers ourselves, as hobby shop operators, being out in the public, chatting with other hobby store owners, going to events and tournaments ourselves over the years, big ones, small ones. This is just a culmination of like our thoughts and feelings about our experience. So it's not necessarily the truth. It's just what we see in this world. So to start off, I think the period I'd kind of begin with, and I don't necessarily want to put a year on this, but maybe I'd go back almost 8 or 10 years and say you started to see this really big push from and this is completely outside of Games Workshop at this point. This is a push, an independent push to professionalize and sort of establish sort of like a universal like tracking system or a tournament system for 40K specifically to start. And there, Warhammer was lumped in there at the time and stuff too, AOS. And this probably actually goes back even further than 8 years, but this is when it started to kind of maybe pick up a lot more steam and started to become a bit more normal.
Games Workshop wasn't tackling that or didn't have any interest in it.
And their method, their kind of ideology was always like,
we just make the models.
We make the models and the rules, and if you guys want to play that way, that's all fine by us.
Some guys in the U.S. created this thing called the ITC, which was tied to an app or
independent tournament circuit, I think.
Which was then tied to something called Best Coast Pairings, which was an app that you could download and use to track, and so that you could play in ITC events, and you could be a Blood Angels player and win some tournaments and play a lot of games, and you could go check where you rank among all the other ones. You could be you could accrue a bunch of points, and you could then show your friends and be like, "Oh, look, I'm the third best guy."
They gave that, and that gave people that care about that sort of thing, the competitive thing. You see that in video games all the time, the ranking systems and all that stuff, and I guess it in a weird way it validates that type of experience, because if you care about how good you are at something, you always want to measure that. How do I measure that against stuff? So it gave people sort of like a measure, and also a feeling that a feeling of it kind of all connected together. I played in this event here, but it's part of something bigger.
Even if you don't win, if you just place well, then you're still accruing points. Your elo is going up or whatever, or down in the background for that particular thing that you're trying to,
And while this is happening, we're already kind of starting I'd say we're into the decline in Warmachine. We're hitting that 3rd edition point where it's shedding players like crazy. We're already past the best sales peak that they had in 2nd, and they're into 3rd, and they're starting to shed players. Those players are looking for new homes. I don't think it's a coincidence that's when that stuff starts to happen. Because you have a lot of fairly competitive people that are looking for a new game that they want to play competitively, right? So they're applying some of the ideas they had with Warmachine. Warmachine did the competitive play, organized play thing really well. And when I say really well, I'm not talking about the culture. I'm just talking about the structure, the organization, the having lots of options. Tournament stores are running tournaments all the time for the game, so they're thinking we want that, but with 40K now, and that's when you start to see even at the local level, shops running 40K events every month or every other week or.
Yeah, we're in an era of so many tournaments. Everything is every weekend. There's a tournament for 40K or multiple tournaments for 40K across where we are, like every game.
And it's funny because like that's when also it started to, like that's when to me it became real, because like I remember maybe a year or two into when we opened, it wasn't okay just to run a 40K tournament anymore. People would be like, "Oh, does it count towards like people
wanted ITC
wanted it to be registered with the ITC."
Yep.
And that actually affected attendance. So like if you weren't running it through that system, people weren't really as interested in going to that one because there was another one they could go to that was going to be tracked, right?
Yeah. Was it enough just to play for fun? I need my points.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, you have this kind of like period where that's going on, and I think as it's almost like two sliders, right, going this way, and as Warmachine kind of really started to fail in terms of sales, shedding players, moving more through third edition. Games Workshop as a business was whether you want to say this was a good move or not, the one thing they were doing is like they were fixing a lot of the problems that people had with the company, like the lack of communication, the lack of organized play, the lack of all these things. They said, okay, this is kind of when Warhammer community started, at that period too. So they started communicating with people more directly. They had more customer servicey, like people responding on their social media stuff, whether you like it or not. They were making a concerted effort to kind of like actually put information out there. And this is when they started this is the beginning of the Blitz, the online Blitz, when they started the cloud to just take over the the YouTube world.
There's the
with your influencers,
with all the influencers, and the Warhammer community had a distinct moment where it, I think, solidified it as the place to go. And I remember this. What happened was Thousand Suns were getting Magnus the Red, so it was the first plastic demon Primarch in main game 40K. I think this is probably 8th edition. Or maybe late 7th or something like that.
I think 8th was right. Yeah,
he's either late 7th or early 8th. And there was a potato quality photo online of like a sprue or something, which they may or may not have leaked themselves because it was one of those dumb moments where you're like, it's 2000. This would have been 2016 or 17. Well into the iPhone, Android, whatever. And you're like, there's no way a camera can take a photo that badly.
It's almost impossible.
You have to go out of your way to get like a vintage camera and then not know what you're doing with it. So anyway, so that went out.
We need tinfoil hats or whatever.
Tinfoil hats. So this like grainy, shitty photo came out of the thing, and then the next day or whatever it was, because it was making its rounds on Reddit or something, Warhammer community did a little skit with a couple of their guys at the time, and they did a little just tongue-in-cheek thing, and then they're like, "Oh, you mean this thing?" Oh, he's like, "Oh, people are talking about the thing. I don't know anything about it." He's like, "Oh, you mean this?" And he reaches into a dumpster and he pulls it out, and so it confirms the model is coming.
The fully painted one, or whatever.
Well, first they show the sprue, and then the next frame is the spinning, fully done. And then I remember sitting here being like, "Oh, I will never go to another website again. I'm only going to this website." And they started doing more of those to basically drive home that like we can just own all of the internet traffic.
This is the place to.
Why would you go to a crappy third-party 40K website that has no real facts?
Which is maybe this is a whole other video. Yeah. This is when Bell Lossels is like, we have nothing now.
It's over. Yeah.
So we just have to do like crazy rumor
all those websites
stuff. But
they got crushed in one swoop. But to your point, besides the Blitz, they were also releasing more match products, chapter approved match play books.
This is when like the General's Handbook came out. This is when what was the 40K one called? Chapter approved. So they're literally giving those people a product.
Yes, and I guess we'll kind of slide into this next is then this leads into like where they start to really take notice, or because the competitive play or whatever it is, news about competitive play or talk about or balances, it starts to become like a focal point because there's a lot of clicks and engagement with this specifically. I also then saw the first time where you could say, I don't want to say bend the knee, but like they made a snap decision about a rule, or they changed something without it being printed like in a book or something. It was just like and then this basically shows. So I think it was either to do with. There's a few examples. It might have been. There was one.
Remember the Voton?
No, this is well before that.
This is well before that.
This is like 8th ed. I think it was an Adepticon where like the top 8 were all flying Hive Tyrants or something, and they just the next day they were like,
they made a rule of one.
They're
thing
like,
or
from
something.
now on, you need to have boots on the ground, or something.
They just made a snap.
You have to have
decision,
units, and you're like, well, I've never seen them just normally.
That's true, actually. Yeah,
they
that
would just
it does
let
go
that
back that
slide
far.
and let the meta sort itself out. And there was another one where they just decided to make bolters a little better.
Yep.
I don't know if they got extra rend or something. Like just to call it bolter drill, and that touched every bolter weapon, because human sisters or space marine otherwise.
And obviously the Pandora's box there is that now you've basically said we can do this, and now every Johnny out there crying for sorry if your name is actually John, I didn't mean to target Timmy or whatever out there that is crying for a change. That's now a potential thing that can happen because they've shown that they can do it, right? So that's the Pandora's box that you open with that, right?
Yeah. So all this is just reaffirming that the competitive play does get.
Well, let's move it into the modern era now, right? So what to me the modern era starts with when they purchase the ITC, basically. So they basically acquire
for the data, probably, and so they can track things, and
they made one of the guys they gave him a pretty good job too. So he runs either like global events or something like that.
Yeah, so they are like very seriously factoring in this thing, and they're making decisions. Excuse me, on their releases, or I guess the rules and their seasons based on what goes on in here. And I mean, I think a lot of viewers would be like, that doesn't sound so bad. And
yeah. I get that.
In a vacuum, maybe not. Like, I don't know if it's what the consequences there though are that, like, and again, as store owners, I know the people on the internet may not believe it, but the vast majority of collectors, hobbyists, and players do not play in tournaments and are not competitive at all.
I know it's always hard to hear, but that is the absolute truth. Yeah.
It is interesting how much now energy is given to a relatively small piece of the pie, although it is probably the loudest.
Yep.
So then I guess this comes back around to the original topic, is like, how does this tie in with the Warmachine phenomenon, I guess, like.
Yeah, so I mean, you've essentially, in a lot of ways, one of the critiques of Warmachine from a lot of people that collected Games Workshop products, and even Games Workshop probably at the time, was like, maybe 15 years ago, was that like, we're not that, right? We're a company, we make toy soldiers for fantasy worlds, and we sell them to make money. That's like literally as simple as it was. And, I know that's hard for some people to understand, but that's literally the company's mantra. And the game itself is just a vessel to sell those models. And now you could say Warmachine grew out of a resentment. Like, I think, like, the opportunity, not the game itself, not the people making it. There's nothing resentful about making an awesome product like Warmachine. Mm-hmm. Great miniatures, a great world, a very cool product. I think the resentment was like, a lot of people were starting Warmachine because they were tired of the Games Workshop, whatever it was, whether it was they were upset about prices or lack of communication or not happy about balance, or like it wasn't giving them, like, Warmachine, whether you like it or not, saw a market opportunity, and they came in and they exploited that to great lengths and grew a massive amount. But the problem is because that was the reason they grew so much, when the big giant sleeping whale decided to do that a little bit, focus on that stuff, that really took a lot of that kind of power away from Warmachine's special appeal that it had. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, now it's just okay. Now it's just a much smaller company with way less resources, doing the same thing as the big company also is doing, but with way more resources, way more stuff, way more players. So I don't know that was necessarily like Games Workshop's thought process adopting that. I think it was actually like almost it kind of happened so naturally. And they did it like step by step. These little things, like you just kind of outlined through the history, like little moments that they kind of chose to do these things.
Yeah.
And it's led them to a point now where I'm not sure at the start of that journey they would have ever wanted to be there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's not a shot against anyone who's like enjoying competitive play or likes 40K in the current state that is, or AOS or whatever. It's more just like a reflection of like, that's not the business that Games Workshop necessarily likes, wants to run.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, everything about, you know, it is the bigger you get, the more revenue, the more everything grows. You have to, well, it's capitalism, so they have to keep it up. So now they've started to distill. So this is kind of the main, I guess, like the crux of the entire video now is like, are they going down a similar like pitfall? Essentially, you know, are models only going to be judged by, we probably see it already, and we've seen it like based on sales of some things, like are people just not going to buy certain kits and models because of what they do in the game, because they're
there's always been people like that, right? Obviously, there's always
but
been
is it
people
more
like that.
magnified, I guess?
Yeah,
because even casual people, they unfortunately still go and watch the same content makers and they read their Reddits, and they don't have an idea. They only know they play with a friend or two, but then they like the idea of having, well, I heard this army's bad, so I'm not gonna, you know, or this. And we hear it, and that, again, like your point is like that has classically always engaged. I guess it's really a discussion on whether like have we reached a point where that's like truly a problem, or is it still just a nebulous like two people saying that and it's not really the thing? And I don't know. It's hard. It's always very hard to judge like why an army doesn't sell well on launch.
So two things that obviously give it a lot more resilience than I think Warmachine in that sense is like, number one, they had a much more well established hobby part to their game. Which is extremely robust. And number two is they have their own stores.
Yes.
So, I mean, an often forgotten thing is they are generating the types of customers they want every day.
Yes.
So a Games Workshop employee is not going to tell you, buy this set so you can play in tournaments. They don't
run tournaments really.
There might be a couple out there. They're not going to be working for very long.
Yeah.
But ultimately they're getting you into the Games Workshop hobby, which is to build, paint, play, maybe, but mostly collect and paint models, because ultimately that's what keeps the business going.
Yeah.
Collecting and painting models, right? If you paint more models, you'll buy more, right? So that's generally as simple as it is. So those two things, I think, they give them a way to push against the tournamentification or the competitification of what's going on. The only danger I can see is like people go online as a lot of their first experience now. They don't necessarily go into a Games Workshop, so there's a lot of like people that go to Warhammer community for the first time, and you're like seeing like, if you're just reading through articles, how many of those have to do with like balance updates and match play and that sort of thing. My only critique, if there was ever one, is that I think there needs to be 2 to 3 articles for every one article about that.
Yeah.
2 to 3 about building models, painting models, collecting armies, I think, just to kind of keep the balance favorably. Because I think if you're, you can just kind of develop like, a sense for what it's like, I think, just by reading those articles, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think they're at a bit of a point right now where, we're going to wait and see. But, there's a new product coming out. This is a kind of a telling product. It's Games Workshop made circles for the first time.
Yeah.
Right? They actually made objective circles.
Yeah.
Which they're going to sell separately. And it's just funny because like 5 years ago, it's not a product I don't think they'd ever would have thought that they would be making, right?
Yeah.
And there's so much focus on like these card packs for missions and stuff like that. I think sometimes we just lose sight of like why what we're supposed to be doing here. We're supposed to be selling toys to people because they want to create these tiny worlds and have fun with them or whatever.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
I don't know. What do you guys think? You guys think we're a couple old farts or whatever? We don't know what we're talking about. That's probably true.
Yeah.
But do you have any feelings about how that dynamic shifted from like Warmachine kind of like fading off because Games Workshop started to focus on the competitive play a lot more? Was it a good move? Was it a bad move? how do you feel in your local store about the balance that you see? We try to maintain a really good balance here. We have like a really well built out painting spot. So the first thing people see isn't people playing the game, it's people working on models and building and painting things. And then downstairs is where we kind of do our games and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's obviously it's a take, and I don't know. What do you guys think? Leave a comment below. Keep them spicy, and if you like these kind of videos, tune in each week. We do a couple, and if you really like them, you can support us on Patreon. The link below. Just for a few bucks a month to help us, like we kind of are upgrading the equipment and stuff like that for these videos to make them better for you guys. So until next time, take care.
Thanks. Bye.